You have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV. Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hello everybody, happy Friday to you. Welcome to TV Guidance Counselor. As you can probably tell, this is a week where you're getting 2 episodes, as we got an episode a couple days ago on Wednesday, as per usual. Occasionally, I am lucky enough to have more than one great guest and an opportunity to speak with amazing people more than once a week. And when that does happen, I do release several episodes in a week, and this week is one of those weeks. I promise I will say the word week much less often for the remainder of the episode, but today it is an honor to welcome my guest, the one and only Tabitha Soren. Tabitha was the face of MTV News for many years, has worked in a wide variety of news programs. We talk about it here. If you are remotely close to my age group, you absolutely remember Tabitha from MTV. She is incredibly smart, has a fascinating story on how she got to MTV and what she's been doing since then, and how she got to where she is today. She's one of the smartest people I've certainly ever met, and I love talking to her. These days, she's a photographer, and a really great one. She has a book that comes out tomorrow called Fantasy Life, Baseball and the American Dream, and it is incredible. She's a really, really talented photographer, amazing eye, and as someone who does not even like sports, I am amazed by this book. Definitely pick it up if you enjoy photography, or if you know anyone that likes photography or baseball. It would be an amazing gift. It's a really, really great book, and I cannot recommend it enough. I will put links up on tvguidancecounselor.com for you to purchase that book, and check out some of her other work as well. It's just amazing photographs that she's taken over the years. But we talked today about her television work and her experiences with TV. And again, I want to thank her for sitting down and taking the time to talk to me about this stuff. It was, as I said, an absolute honor. I was in the Bay Area, and she took some time out of her busy day to talk to me, and I cannot thank her enough. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Tabitha Soren.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Tabitha Soren, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Ken.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for doing this. We're high atop somewhere in California. I'm very lost, but it's very idyllic and nice.
You're in the Berkeley Hills.
The Berkeley Hills, my New Englander in me still goes, this is so nice, but would be terrible in the winter. And then I realized...
Well, fortunately, all we have is rain. No snow.
Yes. We'll be washed down the hill. So I plied you with sort of some late 70s, early 80s sort of TV guides there, which was my sort of approximation of when you probably watched the most TV, maybe slightly off years-wise. But did you grow up in Texas?
I was born in Texas, but my father was in the military. He was in the Air Force, so I've lived all over the place. And I lived, actually, for a time in the Philippines without a TV.
Oh, wow. Was that the only foreign country you lived in when your dad was in the military?
No, I also lived in Germany, but I think we had a TV then, although I don't really recall because I was around kindergarten age.
A friend of mine, his father was also in the military and traveled in. They had weirdly military-specific TV guides that TV Guide printed just for military bases, like American shows, and he sent me some. They were very strange. Did you feel detached from American culture at all when you were there?
Definitely when I was in the Philippines, I felt detached from American culture. But in Germany, I think... it just seemed wonderful and fun.
Right.
There were so many cool things to do. We took the train all over into different countries. And even as a kindergartner, I appreciated the difference in food and language. And I spoke German. So it was a stimulating time. I don't remember missing TV.
Right.
But definitely as a 5th and 6th grader in the Philippines, I definitely missed American culture.
Was there any American culture stuff that you were able to latch onto there that you would...
Yes, my mother and father would take trips to places like Hong Kong or Taiwan, and they would come back with books that the pages were on. It was such cheap paper that they were very hard to read because you couldn't.
It's like tissue paper.
Yeah, you
like
could
Gideon
see
Bibles.
one set of words through the other, and so there were Nancy Drew books and things like that they brought back, and additionally, I got some Bee Gees records and Saturday Night Fever and maybe Xanadu, maybe Grease. I can't really remember, but
Olivia Newton John all the time.
you know, the things that were at the top of the pop charts.
Right.
No, the Clash, and you know, the whole punk thing when it was burgeoning. Just I was completely oblivious to it, and I don't know if that was because of me not being cool enough or just me being in the Philippines.
It's probably the Philippines. I would say that you're cool enough.
I haven't actually worked out the years and the timing, but
well, it probably sounds like early 80s. If it was, when was Xanadu was 1980, I think, and Saturday Night Fever was 77, I think. So it's probably in that general vicinity. But when you got back to the States, you would have been like probably 7th, 8th grade, somewhere around there. Did you feel like you needed to catch up, like in cram, to catch up to all the kids your age?
I don't think one thinks that broadly at that age. I think we came back from the Philippines and landed in Destin, Florida, which is right next to Fort Walton Beach, Florida, which is on the Panhandle, which is a very southern, traditional place. Some people refer to it as the redneck Riviera. And I felt total culture shock there coming from the Philippines. And there was a definition of womanhood and girlhood and beauty there that I didn't relate to and didn't fit into either. And there were proms in 9th grade and popularity contests and just a lot of heavy duty stuff that made junior high really rough. So learning the rules of the town and the school and the neighborhood, that was enough for me to readjust to. Mm-hmm. Pop culture came probably as I was about to move almost. I remember I had a very cool friend in Las Vegas who was in a band, and her older brother was in a band. I was the oldest, so I didn't have anybody to hand down cool stuff to me. And I would actually, I don't know if I sent them to her or if she just bought them for me, but she would decorate my notebooks from Las Vegas with, you know, Led Zeppelin logos and AC/DC logos and Aerosmith logos. And that made me feel really cool. I was listening to some of those, but not all of them.
So you would basically mail her a notebook and you'd get it back with
something like that.
Like, what are these magical words?
So I could carry it around Destin and Fort Walton Beach and seem a little tougher than I was.
Were you watching TV at that time that you recall? Were there any
Yes,
shows
I definitely. I don't know how the years line up, but I definitely watched Charlie's Angels. I definitely watched the Brady Bunch. I definitely watched Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley.
All that Gary Marshall stuff. Were you a Little House kid?
I did like Little House on the Prairie, but Gary Marshall's son actually worked with me at MTV, and his name was Scott probably now, but he was a gem. And so it was really exciting because I was such a fan of his father's work, which is probably, you know, the bane of his existence.
Did you ever like geek out and ask him all kinds of
No.
Marshall? You just knew it was like a silent understanding.
Yeah, I figured he had had enough of that. It's like people asking me about Bewitched.
Yes, yeah. And would you named after the character on it?
My mother says she named me after a character in the Bible that is spelled very similar, and it is the little girl who had risen from the dead. Okay. And when I went to Israel last year, there was a whole area that was devoted to this Saint Tabitha. There was a church, there was a cemetery, there was an altar. Right. So there were a lot of things that sort of made my mother's claim seem solid. But I was born in 1967, and that is the year that Bewitched started. Yeah. So seems a little fishy.
Did you get a lot of like kids who are well known for their tolerance and not being cruel, taunting you like Tabitha was?
No, she was such a cute character on that show that it was always in a nice way, and it was always something about being able to wiggle my nose, which I couldn't. And I recently saw a little, I don't know if you call it a meme exactly, but a little video where they had slowed down Elizabeth Montgomery's nose. And in fact, she didn't move her nose at all. She moved her lips. Yeah. And I just thought that was such magic, you know, because I never ever would have figured that out. And I feel like, I don't know if I did this more than normal children. Perhaps it was because of the peripatetic lifestyle. I was noticing details that made me feel like one of the gang or that connected me to just anything. But my sister was named Erin. And the actress who played Tabitha was also named Erin. So I thought that was very interesting. And Erin Murphy, bless her heart, has also gotten in touch with me as a grown-up, which is just, I mean,
what a
bizarre.
Weird,
Better her than the porn star named Tabitha.
Oh yes. There are probably many.
There are. We don't spell our names the same way most usually.
Thankfully. Bewitched was such a strange. I mean, for a generation of us, and especially those of us who are latchkey kids, like Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie was the hour. Addams Family and Monsters was the hour, and then Brady Bunch got its own hour. They'd do back to back. But it was so odd to see those so many times where shows, I mean, you think Bewitched ended in 1974, but through the 90s, I mean, daily watching this show from 30 years ago. And I can't imagine children now watching a 30-year-old show every day for an hour.
No, definitely not. My kids definitely think of anything to do with the world before a smartphone as the olden days.
Right. Did they ever revisit any of the stuff that you did on MTV, or have you ever shown any of them that stuff?
Not in front of me. I've tried to show them. They have very little interest. And then I'll mention something and they'll have admitted to having seen it. Right. So if I didn't show it to them, they're looking it up for some reason. So certainly during the election campaign, because of my experience with the Clintons, I think they looked that kind of stuff up. They're aware of me shooting down Mariah Carey's PR person on YouTube.
Right.
There actually isn't all that much stuff of mine out there because it was pre-digital or pre-internet. And apparently they've watched the Tupac stuff on YouTube, but none of us ever went to see the movie or anything like that.
There was also the Tabitha spin-off series where Lisa Hartman played her. There's only one season.
I remember that too vaguely. I don't know that I ever saw it, but
it wasn't too bad.
My parents were definitely of the school of an hour of TV a day. So I had to pick and choose carefully. And certainly sometimes I got more than that. Definitely on Saturday mornings, I watched at least 3 hours of cartoons back to back.
Yeah.
And as a parent now, I completely understand why, because my parents wanted to sleep in and not be up with me. So I love Josie and the Pussycats and
Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels.
No, did not like that one. And I also hated the one with the space ship that came down. It wasn't a cartoon. It was
there was Farrah Space Nuts with Bob Denver. That was
that wasn't it. What else you got?
Also, Arc 2. There was Jason of the Star Command. It was a live action with a spaceship. It wasn't Land of the Lost.
Land of the Lost.
Oh, it was Land of the Lost.
I hated it.
I hate Chaka.
Hated it.
Terrified me. That.
And then there was one with like a whole. This is more kid-like, but it was live action, I guess is what they would call it. But it had like monsters in a forest and
HR Puffnstuff?
Yeah,
that was terrifying. The talking flute. Yeah. All those Sid and Marty Krofft shows, absolutely.
They're all made by the same person.
Same two guys. It was these two brothers, and they actually had an amusement park in Atlanta based on all of the characters that was only open for a year. And they sued McDonald's because McDonald's ripped off HR Puffnstuff for like McDonaldland and Grimace and all those things. And they won a huge lawsuit in like 1982.
Wow. Good for them.
And then just retired.
Imagine that.
Yeah. They also produced a lot of the variety shows like Donny and Marie.
I watched that. Yeah. And in Las Vegas, I got to go see that live.
You saw a taping of that?
Yes.
Wow.
I know. Well, I don't know if it was a taping of the show or they came to Las Vegas to do a show.
Right.
But my dad was at Nellis Air Force Base, so I lived in Las Vegas for 4 years. And I remember when I was grown up enough for my mom to take me to the Strip and go see a show. I wasn't, obviously of gambling age or anything like that, but she didn't like us to be around there at all because of the strippers and the mafia and all sorts of bad influences. So getting to go down there for the Donny Marie show, I thought I was going to die. I got a huge Donny Marie poster, and I was in heaven, and my sister was pissed because she didn't get to go.
Were you ever, so you're the oldest, were you ever dictating sort of the pop culture of your siblings, or their shows that you sort of
I had
thrust
one
on them?
sister, and I'm sure as a dominating Leo that I was, but we probably had to take turns in my household
Right.
as well. I don't remember arm wrestling over it too much. I mean, Little House on the Prairie has everything for every age girl, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I've never met...
Charlie's Angels,
Charlie's
can't
Angels.
argue with that. I was a huge Farrah Fawcett fan. I spent hours with the curling iron trying to get my hair to imitate her.
The feathering.
And I remember going to some sort of amusement park and trying so hard with darts to hit the Farrah Fawcett poster so that I could bring one home. And it was the bathing suit poster with the erect
classic.
nipples.
Yeah.
And clearly that was designed for men.
Oh, yes.
But
Yeah.
I was oblivious to that in, I don't know, second or third
Her
grade.
hair's so pretty.
Yeah. And the guy, I tried so hard that the guy just basically gave me the poster at the end for free.
He probably wasn't getting a lot of little girls begging
No,
for the Farrah
exactly.
Fawcett
Probably
poster.
not. Probably not.
So you're moving around all the time, and then you move to New York for school, right? Did you go to NYU?
Mm-hmm.
Was that really the first time you'd been to New York?
No, I'd been, I never lived there, but I had been there. My parents are from New England, so they would take
Okay.
me to New York City for a fun trip every so often.
Whereabouts in New England did your parents grow up?
My parents live in Rhode Island, and that's where they met as well. So they, after moving all over the world, they came back and retired there.
Yeah, my grandmother's whole side of the family's from Rhode Island.
Yes, I mean, my
spent every
poor
summer in
husband, he's
Narragansett.
like, are they in Worcester or are they in, I don't know. It all
Woonsocket?
sounds,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
all the same. Warwick,
Yeah.
Wickford.
Wickford. I remember we, a couple years ago, this is a total tangent, but we had a scam company that was calling old people in Massachusetts saying they're from a bank, a local bank, and they needed their bank details. And it was Woburn Bank, which is how we pronounce it in Massachusetts. They're like, I'm calling from Woburn Bank. And they're like, you're not from Woburn Bank. Like, they knew immediately.
Thank
and it
goodness.
didn't work. Yeah, it was like, odd New
accent
England
saves the
pronunciation.
day.
Yes, saves their retirement money. So you go to New York for school, and did you have an idea of what New York would be like, even though you had visited it, but from sort of popular culture and movies and television when you moved there?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I probably learned a lot about New York from Madonna music videos and definitely, even Saturday Night Fever had images of New York that you can't get out of your head. I can't think of anything specific, but I definitely had seen all the Woody Allen movies and When Harry Met Sally. And actually, When Harry Met Sally might have been after college. But certainly New York is glamorized in movies and television. And I was a sucker for it.
Yeah.
But I also knew what I wanted to do, and I knew all the media companies were in New York. And so I felt like I was there for a purpose, and it was a good thing at NYU because it's so huge that if you're just wandering or you're not sure what you want to study, it's not a place that's going to help you decide.
Right. So what sparked the desire to be in the media? You were watching sort of an average kid's amount of television and consuming, it sounds like, sort of an average amount of popular culture.
Well, I think that because of the military, I wrote a lot of letters to friends at a very early age. I actually remember watching Big Blue Marble.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I participated maybe in their pen pal program. Just because I already had a ton of pen pals. I was leaving friends behind very often. And so I think my writing skills just got really good. So in high school, I was the editor of the paper. I was the editor of the yearbook. I interviewed people. I was new. Because I was new to each neighborhood, you'd kind of have to interview people to figure out how to dress, how to be accepted,
Right.
who's nice, who's not. I mean, it's not a direct Q&A, but you are sort of sniffing around like a detective.
It's investigational journalism for your own benefit. So,
Yes, exactly. So I was comfortable asking strangers questions. And so when I told my dad I thought I wanted to be a writer, he said, how about a journalist? Because they actually get paychecks. And I thought, that seems practical and
That's
good.
a military
Let's
dad.
do that. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So I married a writer instead.
Yeah. Well, then you get the best of both worlds at that point. Were there any journalists that you were like, I want to have their career, like that kind of journalist? I'm trying to think of high profile journalists at the time when we were growing up that maybe.
I mean,
would've
I
been-
definitely was struck by Diane Sawyer. I thought she was amazing, but I don't know if that's because she was so jaw-droppingly beautiful or because she was a great journalist. I don't think I wasn't that educated about the muckrakers of the newspaper business over time. I was there to get an education on that sort of thing. I went there just feeling like, well, what do I have a talent at? What do I have a knack for? And that's what landed me at the Washington Square News. And I hung out with a whole bunch of people who were really grumpy, and they had to write their stories in a triangle format, which is the bottom gets cut off. You put the least important details at the bottom, and then if they run out of space, they just chop it off.
Bleeds it leads kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And there were people who then graduated and had to work 7 days a week and every holiday. And it just seems like a recipe for misery to stay at a newspaper. So at NYU, at the end of the other hall in the student union was the radio station, and all the cute guys were getting off the elevator and turning right, not turning left into the newspaper area. So probably my sophomore year, I thought, I think I will work at the radio station this year instead. And I met a bunch of really cool people, got an education in punk rock and what was actually happening in college radio at the time, which was a lot.
Yes, yeah.
So, I mean, we definitely still had, leftovers from the Clash coming by, but we also had Michael Stipe from REM and went before he had really learned to sing. And
I think that Jones was doing Big Audio Dynamite and living
absolutely.
in New York. Yeah.
But I think that what I found there is that some people are born with pipes that make them pursue radio very appropriately. And my voice wasn't bad, but it wasn't like when Hugh Foley opened up his mouth, or Lee Lust, or John Fox. There were these voices around the radio station at that time where you were just like, okay, I'll stay on AM or I'll read the news.
I have the authority.
So then I ended up reading the news, and that made much more sense because I could write it very lickety-split, and it all had to be very fast. And then I got an internship at CNN through a professor, Edward Diamond, at the NYU Journalism School, and he was a big New York Magazine writer and editor, and he was famous in New York for his work there. So he was friends with someone at CNN, so they gave me a job there. And once I started working with pictures, it was so easy. I just really felt like, whoa, people get paid for this? So between my voice not being distractingly ugly and a knack for working with pictures, those three rolled into a really good television reporter. I could tell stories. I wrote working with pictures for whatever reason, maybe because I was always shooting still photos. None of it seemed arduous. School was much harder than working at CNN, which then led to a lot of other jobs. If I had been someplace besides New York, I would have got a job a lot of my friends went to UVA because I went to high school in Virginia. So, you'd be at the Charlottesville Journal or whatever the newspaper is called. And then there was, if you didn't like it at the newspaper, there was one radio station you could try. Or, in New York, there was a plethora of choices. So if you fell out of love with newspapers and then you found you weren't that great at radio, you could try TV as a third choice, and none of that was something you had to wait to do until you were a senior. Right.
It was available to you instead of you had to
all
sort
the
of
way
age into
through.
it.
Like, am I good at this? Do I fit in here? Are these my people? It was a good place to bounce around.
Did you have to go to Atlanta for CNN, or was they
No,
New York
they had
office?
a New York office.
Have you ever seen the CNN Doomsday video?
No, what's
you heard
that?
of it? So Ted Turner commissioned, completely seriously, a video to play at the end of the world that CNN would play to sign off from the world if we had a Holocaust of nuclear proportions.
So great.
And he made it in 1984, I think. And it came out, someone posted on YouTube about 2 years ago, and it is insane. And it's 100% real. It's like he has this marching band play, and it's the White House, and it's like, goodbye, America. Like, it is this amazing thing. And
God, how terrifying.
It's so terrifying if you stop to think about it for more than a second, but on the surface of it, it's just so... It's such an odd relic.
Well, that just reminds me of having to do obits for World News Tonight for people who aren't dead yet. They have a whole closet full of people who are either living, rock and roll drug lifestyles, or people who are past a certain age or perennially unhealthy. And that's just so they can just get it on the air, just, add a little tidbit at the end or introduce it a particular way with the details of the death. And then boom, it's on the air first.
Did you find that, because when I worked in radio for years in Boston television news, and that those people do get desensitized to empathy sometimes, especially prime example, that sort of thing. And you don't strike me as that kind of person, despite being very newsy.
Well, thankfully, I'm not trying to get 3 stories on the air in one day anymore. But in my first job in Burlington, Vermont, for a local ABC station there, I had to get 3 stories on every single day. And let's say I was working over July 4th and I did the parade in the morning and nothing else is happening the entire day. So I'm giving, as the anchor, extra time to sports, extra time to weather, but there's only so much you can give away. And I remember hearing on the police scanner, some UVM student had fallen out of his window because he was drunk. And I went, yes! And
Something to do!
I jumped in the car with my camera and my lights and ran over there hoping I would get there in time for an ambulance shot or something. So that is not me, but that's somebody doing their job.
Right. It's easy to go down that path when that's your job.
Right.
But that speaks to as well for, not that Vermont's microscopic, but it's a small town sort of news organization, and you're the anchor. But you have to go with a camera and lights to get a story.
Yeah. You just did everything. Probably on the holiday I was doing anchoring because the person who was the anchor wanted the day off.
Right.
I technically anchored the 11 o'clock news. I did not anchor the 6. But when she wanted a day off, then I would anchor both. And most of the time I was a State House correspondent, so I had to drive from Burlington to Montpelier. And often on the way, there's a huge snowstorm and they're telling people to stay off the road and you shouldn't be driving. And I had to sort of pull the car over on the highway and take pictures of people like running off the road.
New story. Happening around me. Yeah.
It is counterintuitive. But thankfully in that job I had a governor who had been a former reporter, Governor Madeline Kunin. She went on to be education secretary for Bill Clinton, and she really took me under her wing while I was learning how to run a 3/4 tape deck, record all the audio, get the microphone and the cube in a place where the TV camera could see it, have lights supplementing the light in the press conference. Mine were always the ones with a spun glass over them were setting on fire because I would never get them in the right position. But of course, anytime everybody was like, whose lights are those? I was like, nah, not me, not mine. So I had many blue stand-ups because I forgot to white balance. I had a press conference without audio one time because I checked the audio cables, but then it turned out they weren't all the way plugged in. Tons of battery problems because the cold weather in Vermont would make your batteries last like a minute.
Yeah.
And, I'm driving myself on top of it, and I've lived there all of 3 minutes. And the directions are, before GPS, the directions would be like, well, there's this very large tree right after, so-and-so's farm.
Yep.
And somehow I was supposed to find my way to the Fish and Wildlife Committee meeting.
Classic New England is to give you directions based on things that used to be places. So they'll be like, you want to go down by where the Joneses used to live, and then it's going to be the old gas station that's not a gas station. And you're like, how would I know this? But then my wife is from England. She always jokes that the day she knew she'd lived there too long was when someone gave her directions like that, and she knew how to get somewhere.
Yeah, that's scary. Oh, that's time to get out of Dodge.
So this is a pre-MTV. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people probably don't know necessarily that you had this sort of learn by doing, boots on the ground education in real news before, not that MTV wasn't real news, but the traditional newsrooms before you had gotten to MTV. And
well, it's kind of good because then people thought I just magically was good at something.
Yeah.
But no, I worked really, I was Gabe Pressman's assistant. He's a very, School of Hard Knocks, old New York radio reporter who then went to TV. I've worked at a ton of different places. MTV got the most attention, but for a couple of years at MTV, I was also simultaneously working at NBC. I was on the Today Show. I was on Dateline. I was on this show that Tom Brokaw and Katie Couric had that was a news magazine show together. So I definitely landed in New York ready to hustle, and I hustled, and I found what I wanted to do early, and so I was competent at it at a young age, which got me a lot of attention because the older journalists were like, scratching their head, but
Right.
she's only 22.
Right. Because Kurt was like the only person on MTV, was the face of MTV News, and he used to be the editor of Rolling Stone, I think, at the time, and he's an
done
older
everything.
guy.
Yeah.
He's an older guy, and
He started it in the army, writing in Germany when he was in the military, and then he wrote for Cream.
Right.
I don't know if you remember
Yep.
that magazine,
Lester
but I
Bangs,
read it like all the time in high school, and then he went to Rolling Stone, and then MTV pulled him away from Rolling Stone to pay him more money to be on TV and do easier work.
Yep.
So he was like, nothing wrong with that. And I could not have had a better partner in crime. That guy totally could have been competitive with me, and he only helped me. He basically Xeroxed his contract to make sure that I got everything that I deserved.
Wow, which is highly unusual.
Very
for people.
unusual.
Did you think you felt a kinship with him? Because it sounds like you have a lot in common with like the military German thing. You know, was there like a...
I just loved his sense of humor. He
Yeah.
was so dry. He's so dry. I loved that he was a libertarian. I loved that he was supportive. I loved that he smoked. Everything was good about him. We just got on.
Yeah.
So I just did an interview pretty much kicking and screaming against my will about Tupac. Some network is putting on like a 6-part series about Tupac. And I get asked this a lot, and they asked me, so, how come you and Tupac had such an energy? How come you guys got along so well, having just met? Because I hadn't spent any time with him before, and nor did I afterwards. But that's not something you can really explain. It's not something I expected. It just happened. He happened to be in a really good mood, and I knew what I was talking about to a certain extent. Not that I was a diehard Tupac Shakur fan or hip hop fan, but I had done my research. And same thing with Kurt. I don't know why we were, I was definitely the foil, but that was a role I was comfortable in. Like, he would say something mischievous and I would sort of roll my eyes, and it was just great. And I'm still friends with him, and his Christmas cards and emails and all that still make me laugh.
Oh yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, that he was the guy that I latched onto on MTV, which people were like, "What?" I'm like, "This guy's so cool," and
he doesn't waste it.
everything."
He would. Having been with him on stories and interviews where I would watch the entire thing transpire, we would come back and a conventional mind would have written a story about this artist in a particular way. I can't give you an example.
It would be very PR-ish, maybe.
Kurt would go and find the funny thing that happened at the event, or the story the guy told as a tangent that was wildly interesting compared to the record they were putting out or the tour that they were going on or whatever they were pushing.
Right.
So, and he would get it done in a 3-minute piece. I mean, it wasn't like this indulgent, I need 10 minutes to tell this experience. So he didn't really waste a word. I would always have him look over my scripts if they were important. And I learned a lot so he was my Strunk White. He was the person who, if I had a question about, is it maybe or they may have, and he was always like, it either is or it isn't.
Right.
If it's not one of those, it doesn't go in.
Right. Prior to that, you were in the Beastie Boys video, correct? Right for Party?
Yeah,
Little
for like
cameo there?
3 minutes.
Was that just because you were like hanging around?
You know why that was? At the Washington Square News, NYU's wonderful paper, I was assigned to interview Rick Rubin, who was paying people to finish his finals and running, or had, there were all these legends about Rick even at that time. So he had already exited NYU, but was living downtown. And he started a record company in Weinstein Dorm, which is NYU's dorm, with LL Cool J, and then had moved on to the Beastie Boys and whatnot. So when I met him, we got on because I have been passionate about music and, knew all this extraneous totally useless information until I got to MTV. And then it was like, I know the answer to that.
Right.
So Rick and I got on in that way because he's definitely a music historian as well. And so we stayed friends after that interview. And I was supposed to meet him for lunch. So I came to meet him for lunch. And it was a music video shoot and they needed more people. So
Right.
I was like, all right, well, I'm hungry. Can we...
Before or
can we
after
go?
we... Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing that makes me chuckle about that is that I look like a total music video... I'm trying to think of a nice word. Just a...
Vixen?
Yeah, there you go.
You got some teeth
And
hair
that's
and a leather
just
jacket.
the way I was walking around town. I didn't even know there was a music video. That is the
Right.
crazy part of that. It's like, no. I had blonde, huge hair and was wearing a leather jacket and, like a dress with the corners cut, sides
New York
cut out.
in the mid-'80s. That's how
Holy mackerel.
But that ties into...
I can't believe he was friends with me.
I'm sure he seemed pretty cool. But it ties into the fact that you're able to pull together an interest that a young person has in a popular culture medium and combine it with sort of old world practical journalism.
Yeah,
and,
the paycheck thing.
Yeah, and make it
Absolutely.
into something new. And we really never had that before you and Kurt really kicked off that sort of era of MTV News, where it was now serious, but it wasn't just like, here's the parents part of the show. It was still with a youthful, a genuine youthful outlook without being patronizing and like, a 60-year-old man going, what are the kids like?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time informative and with the right voice. And it was almost a perfect distillation of that. And I imagine part of it sounds like you were probably aware of and sort of planning a bit because you were savvy at the time. But did it ever hit you that was something different from what you'd experienced before?
I wasn't trying to make something different. I was trying to make something I wanted to watch. So that's the key. Mm-hmm. You can't try to do something new. It will come across as phony and it won't work no matter what the it is. And in this case, I mean, this is going to sound a little Berkeley, a little woo-woo, but I quit my job in Vermont because I was getting depressed. I hate the outdoors. So, and that's all people did for fun there, hike and camp and like all this hideous stuff. So, and also I was working from like 3 o'clock till midnight. So I never got to go out and get to know people because I was anchoring the 11 o'clock news. And I missed my boyfriend in New York and I missed my posse.
Yeah.
And I just decided, you know what? I'm on camera here. It's a really hard job to get. I'm good at it, but I must be able to be good at something else too in a place that would make me happy. So I'm going to quit and go back to New York and figure out some sort of producing job. And I had worked at enough places that I thought I could find something as a freelancer or what have you. Mm-hmm. And my boss, the head of the news department at MTV, who I had worked for at CNN, said to me, Tabitha, I would never be able to put you on the air here. This is the number one market in the country. And I was at number 99, Vermont is.
Right.
Which is pretty high for a first job because it encompasses Montreal. That's the only reason it's so high. Not that people were actually watching. And I was like, yeah, no problem, Dave. No problem. I get that. I didn't care. I'll just produce. No big deal. That's a living. And I can do something I know stuff about. And I'll get paid to learn about things I don't know so much about.
Right.
And I got to New York and I started freelancing variety of places. I was actually Robert De Niro's assistant for a month because that person left to a friend of mine who had that job left to make a movie or a commercial or something. And then I worked at VH1 for a minute. I associate produced some show on censorship. And then somebody got the flu at MTV News. So I filled in for her. I literally had a cardboard box with, some notes, some pens, a stapler, not a phone. Every day I had to tell the person a different number to call me back at. And whoever was absent that day, I would move my little cardboard box to their desk. And then John Norris, if you recall, he did all the pop music. He was a MTV News reporter, very good at it, but he really wanted to be a VJ because that was just more of his ilk.
Right.
And he got promoted to being a VJ, and Kurt no longer had a substitute. And Kurt Loder had a vacation planned, and Kurt Loder was going on that vacation if he had to quit over it. So he went into the control room and told Dave, Tabitha used to read a teleprompter in Vermont. Why don't we see if she could sub? And if you saw my audition tape, you would see that I had no plans to be there because the outfit is completely breaks every rule of what you wear on TV.
Leather jacket, tees blonde.
No, like a crazy vintage
Patterns,
graphic
moire.
pattern, like insane. And but in Vermont, I had to run my own teleprompter because in Vermont you had to do everything yourself. Right. And
so you had that crank wheel that you had to...
No, it was like a little dial, which was stripped.
Yeah.
And every time you push it too hard, your entire script would go flying by because it was all sheets of paper taped to each other.
Yeah.
But I digress. In MTV, they had a digital teleprompter, and they had somebody else running it. So, my God, all of a sudden, I have nothing to do except read the teleprompter and not get any of the words wrong and not have my eyes go left and right. So, it was a no-brainer. It was so easy. And Kurt was in the control room, and he goes, I'm calling the car. Like, I'm going to the airport. We're done here. Right, Dave? And Dave was like, all right. So the only reason I got on the air there was because somebody had the flu, and then somebody got promoted, and then somebody wanted to go on vacation.
Every time you talk to Kurt now, you're like, thank you for that going on vacation that year.
I mean, it just gives you, I guess the reason I tell that story, and I should have made it much shorter, is that in Vermont, I decided, you know what? Personal happiness has got to be important.
Right.
It cannot just be me being in the military again and having to move my way up through different television stations because they are all ranked, and you go from there to, maybe somewhere in the Midwest to San Diego, and then if you're lucky, Chicago or Dallas, and then, maybe you wind your way back to LA or New York. And I just thought, oh my God, I've basically joined the military.
Yeah.
I don't want
30 years
that.
later, I can retire.
30 years later, I can work in New York.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not waiting that long. Screw this. I don't have to be on TV. I know how to produce. I know how to write. I'll do the behind the scenes.
And would have been perfectly happy with that, it sounds like.
Maybe.
Yeah. In comparison.
I mean, I'm 22. Like, who knows?
Yeah.
So, but I just decided I was going to pursue happiness. And I didn't have any money. There was no trust fund. There's so already if people are thinking about that kind of stuff in the back of their minds, I just didn't have any big desires for material things.
Yeah. You threw caution to the wind in order to, the risk reward was this may pay off big time, but I don't have anything
and that's
to lose.
the age to do it, right?
Yeah.
It's not take a shitty job and stick with it for 25 years and then have the risk.
You can sleep on floors when you're 22, not when you're 32, 42.
So, I feel like I was rewarded, the universe rewarded me for taking a risk.
Right.
And that's why all those things happened.
When did you realize that this was going to be the thing that took off? It wasn't just this wasn't like the Vermont job. Like this had a different national lens.
So when I started Choose or Lose so it must have been the end of 91. I felt like we were doing something that people didn't expect, but I didn't think of that as a good thing. I felt like there were a lot of raised eyebrows and who is this chick anyway? And she's so young. What is she doing here? But I had at that point covered a mayoral election, covered a gubernatorial election. So to me, it made perfect sense that I was now covering a presidential election. And Gabe Pressman was up there. It's in New Hampshire at some point. And I remember like pushing my way in the scrum of reporters up to Pat Buchanan and knocking a couple of people out of the way. And then I turned and I looked and it was Gabe. And I thought, oh my God, but I'm going to have to ask my questions. And then I will reunite with my former boss who I just pushed out of the way.
Who probably appreciated
that. I don't know if he did or not, but
I've taught you well.
So the reason that the point at which I recognized that we were doing something different and good, which is different than just
Just different.
odd, like, why are you here? Was when there was a lull in the campaigns, and there are a couple of points at which there is no news, that all the other reporters decided to do a story on MTV News and the enterprise of trying to register young people to vote. And I was in that mix. And so once they talked to me and heard that I could put a verb, noun, and a preposition in the right order in a sentence, that I wasn't a VJ, that I wasn't a personality, then it dawned on me, oh, okay, well, if the New York Times is writing about me, or the New York Times Magazine, actually, and the Los Angeles Times Magazine, like long stuff where these people like were with me for days,
Right.
waiting for me to screw up, essentially.
Old journalists.
Well,
they weren't
or
old
just
journalists, but the
trying
old journalistic
to prove
world. Yeah.
the joke, you know, and you know, the headline when NBC hired me wasn't like, see, she's proved herself. It was, you know, can she keep up with Andrea Mitchell?
Right. Are you flying too close to the sun here? Yeah.
And then another time where I stumped President Clinton about something in his smoking program. The New York Times wrote about it, but it was basically like, Tabitha Soren, of all people,
Can you believe it?
out policy wonked, the greatest policy wonk ever in the Oval Office.
Right.
Yes, but it was always, you know, surprise. But it was better than not being recognized at all, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you had to fight for it more, but you also had the advantage of preconceived expectations that you could easily
it wasn't that
completely
hard.
flip over.
I mean, to be considered an intellectual at MTV News was not that hard.
Right. Was there anyone that you met when you were working at MTV that you were completely starstruck by, or that you had watched growing up that you were like, wow, this is hitting me so oddly? Like, you know, we discussed Aaron Murphy reaching out to you, which is kind of an odd bookend. But was there anyone that you did a story on, or you were like,
I
man.
think that if I was prone to being starstruck, I wouldn't have been good at that job.
Right.
And my heroes growing up were older. And when it was an older artist, they put them with Kurt, because the artist did not want to look old sitting next to me.
Oh, interesting.
It was a visuals thing. So
Right.
Mick Jagger, with his droopy face,
Yep.
was not going to be sitting next to a 22-year-old, no matter how much the
Not on
22-year-old
camera, at
adored him. Right, exactly. Not on camera. So I certainly met Keith Richards and Mick Jagger and Robert Plant and sort of legends of 70s rock from time to time, Bruce Springsteen. But I don't know. For some reason, I don't get nervous about that.
Yeah.
And I remember trying to impress Joe Perry, of all people,
Right.
because I just loved Aerosmith because of Boston and,
Right.
and New England. And I did tell him that I had all 3 Joe Perry project records, and I don't think anybody on the planet had all 3.
He doesn't even have all
Yeah,
3.
exactly.
You're like, I know
he
who
was just
Charlie
like,
Farron is.
And I told it in front of Steven Tyler, and Steven Tyler was like, what? Like,
Joe has a side
way.
project?
Yeah, exactly.
What a way to find out.
So that was every so often there's a funny moment like that. But the person who I admired the most growing up, or who I just felt in my heart when I had listened to her songs, was Stevie Nicks.
Right.
And when I was at MTV, Stevie Nicks was not in a good way from what I had heard from various knowledgeable sources. And so anytime she was at a party I was at, or if she was backstage at the Video Music Awards, I avoided her like the plague,
Right.
because I just did not want to see
Don't meet
someone
your heroes
disheveled.
kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a total don't meet your heroes. There was one person, actually, when I was a production assistant, I think was probably my title. It was during the summer. So at NYU, during the summers, I would have to find a way to live in New York City for the summer, because my parents were stationed in Hawaii at that point. And no way was I going to spend the summer in Hawaii.
Yeah.
So
And you can't live in a dorm in the summer.
no, I don't think you could.
Yeah.
I don't think you could. So I would piece together work in television and waitress work, cocktail waitress or food waitress. And so during the day I was working at MTV, and I'm pretty sure somebody at Geffen Records, an artist, had just put out a record, and it wasn't Whitney Houston and it wasn't Michael Jackson, but it was somebody on that level for that time. And the only way they were going to give MTV the exclusive video for a certain amount of time was if we interviewed this new band that they had signed. And it was Friday night. You had to go to CBGB's. They were doing an acoustic set, and we also had to interview them and come back with a piece. Nobody wanted to go. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with it. So they sent the lowest person on the totem pole, which was me. And it was Guns N' Roses.
Right.
And I had listened to Appetite for Destruction on a cassette tape, on an advanced cassette. And I thought, this is the greatest thing I'd ever heard. And then I saw an early music video and like watched him shake his hips around the stage. And I just thought, holy mackerel, I'm going. And so I went to that show, which it was so good. They turned it into an album, an EP. And
The Lies EP, was it?
It's the one where he sang, I used to love her, but I had to kill her.
Oh, yeah.
So brilliant. And Axl was actually less crazy then. And Slash was the difficult one. And Slash wouldn't move his top hat out of his eyes, and his hair was in his eyes. And really, it was my job as a producer to make sure there was no Jack Daniels on the table. And so I had to kind of parent them a little bit.
Right.
Like, please get your boots off the table and move your hair out of your face.
You're like 19.
I was.
Yeah.
And Axel's like, you're a little young to be doing this, aren't you? And I said, well, I'm the only one who was a fan. And he was just like, oh, all right. And in that moment, he decided, okay, I'm going to back her up. And he's like, Slash, come on, like, move your hair. And so Slash, I hope he doesn't hear this, but he pushed his hair out of his forehead and his eyes, and on his forehead was covered in whiteheads, like these huge, really not TV ready pimples. And so I was like, you know what? Like, let's go back. Like, just the Jack Daniels has got to stay off, but you know, we can put the top hat back on, but you got to take off your sunglasses. So it was a lot of arm wrestling for a 19-year-old, but because Axl kind of helped me out, I mean, I was just like,
yeah, you proved
over
your
the
mettle,
moon.
and he didn't have to do that. Like,
no, not at all.
Yeah.
And I was just over the moon about him from then on.
The world sort of changed when you started Choose or Lose, and it was the first
Not
time.
the whole world.
Not the whole world. That's when we got the jetpacks. But the sort of world of the engagement of youth, I think, in
Temporarily
presidential election,
changed.
temporarily, but it felt like at the time, this is how things are now. We've broken open a seal, and now we've engaged, and it lasted for probably 10 years, I want to say, of at least of the 90s.
Well, the reason that Choose or Lose is credited with having such an effect on young people was because the 18 to 24-year-old vote of the 1992 election went up like something like 60% from 4 years earlier. But Choose or Lose was just one facet of a couple of other things that formed the zeitgeist that you're trying to describe. So we had a really young candidate, Clinton, and Bill Clinton, I should say, and we had him and his staff exploring other media. He was on the Arsenio Hall show, and he played saxophone, and he treated us like actual people. I mean, I did not have the burden of asking questions that the traditional media were already covering.
Right.
There was no reason for that. I was supplemental, so I could say, you know, do you have any gay friends?
Right.
As opposed to, what was your meeting with the Russian ambassador like?
Right.
But
things that were on people your age's mind probably and resonated with them.
I was hoping to.
Yeah.
It was really the best job because my age and my audience's age were exactly the same.
Right.
I just had more journalistic training.
Right. So it lined up with Clinton, who was kind of the right candidate for that mindset. And now that you've mentioned that, I'm thinking of the footage of you and H.W. Bush on the train. Was it a train you were on?
Right.
And he just is so baffled. Like
he was not very smart about TV because I'll tell you, as soon as that interview ended and he found out my dad had been in the military, he was the nicest guy, so engaged, so interested. And if he had shown that side of himself while we were on the back of a moving train, which was, you know, obviously set up by them so that I would be frazzled.
Yeah.
it would have behooved him, because he's not the jerk that he came across as. But he didn't have the smarts to project that for the 10 minutes that we were together, and we had 4 cameras rolling.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, if you cannot figure that out, then maybe you shouldn't be president.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that lost that election for him, among many things, was that infamous footage of him at the supermarket where he has no idea how much things cost. And it was my favorite thing about that, as someone who sort of studies media and is watching the reporter realize he doesn't know how much anything is and starts asking him everything. So it's like, how much
that
is this?
seems like, gilding the lily. Really.
You didn't really need to, but he's like, how much is milk? A quarter? Like, it was just like 1934 prices. And everyone was like, yes, he's out of touch. And you saw it in that moment unfold. And it was kind of a fascinating thing. Is there anything you watch now? Can you stomach journalism now? Is it difficult to watch?
Oh, I don't really watch any journalism in the traditional sense. I'm just like everyone else. I watch John Oliver.
Yep.
It's amazing. I mean, the stuff that I let my 9-year-old watch it with me, even though he has F-bombs galore, because my son walks away with information about unfair loan practices.
Yeah, it's a master's class. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Like diving in that thoroughly and somehow I could give a rat's ass about soccer, but I think that guy is the devil. The
FIFA, yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Like, it was fascinating.
Because that's a story about a mob, really.
Basically.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
It's like The Godfather.
Our satire has become our actual news, where you get The Daily Show and John Oliver and these sorts of things that they're the people who do the research now, instead of just, I'm just going to say whatever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I definitely miss Jon Stewart, and I haven't watched The Daily Show really since he left, but I'm sure it's still really good. And I relied on him a lot for, just telling me what else was going on. I listen to NPR every morning in the car.
Same.
I spend a lot of time driving around for when I shoot. So I have zillions of podcasts that I curate, so I don't have to listen to bad radio when I'm in between big cities. And I definitely watch a lot of the same dramas that everybody else in the world watches too. I love The Americans. I love basically anything on HBO. My favorite guilty pleasure is a show called Vice Principals, which have you ever seen it? Oh my God. It's got the guy from Eastbound and Down in it.
Okay, yeah, Danny McBride.
And it's about 2 guys competing to be the vice principal. It is a brilliant idea. You have to. They are making another season, but it's a little bit the same tone as Eastbound and Down, which was also genius. So I definitely have too much TV. I loved, and I can't remember her name because I have like intermittent Alzheimer's. But there was a show called, I think, Better Things.
Okay.
It's a show, Louis C.K.
Oh, Louis C.K.
Louis
yeah.
C.K.
It's Pam Adlon. Yes, Pam Adlon show. Yeah.
Her show, you're not a mother, but even if you aren't, I think her show is fantastic. And the theme song is John Lennon's Mother. Yeah. And it's, I mean, just that voice and where they pick it up in the intro, like, it gets me every time. It's like a jab to the heart. I don't know why, but she's so fantastic. I loved her when she was a guest star every so often and played his girlfriend on the Louis, but it's nice for her to have her own space.
She's one of those people that bounced around Hollywood for years as a kid. She was on Facts of Life, and she was in all these sitcoms. She was on a spinoff of Give Me a Break with Don Rickles. And then when she meets someone like Louis, who sees what her humor is, it's amazing that we live in a world now where we're able to produce shows that are actually representative of the people in them and really see what they can do. And it's amazing.
I love how you put that. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And God bless TV for supporting that kind of thing. I mean, I love it. I love that you can start and try out and kind of work out the kinks of something on the internet in a small way, and then have people hungry for it in a more mainstream way, so that people all over, not just the cool people, the cool crowd, get it, but that everyone does.
It's like we all can have an older sibling that we don't have to introduce us to the cool things, even if we're moving around.
And I'm glad Mark Maron and Louis C.K. and Pamela Adlon are like my older sibling, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been great to talk to you.
Same. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Oh, baby, I see you in my
There you go, Tabitha Soren. How great is she? So amazing, really smart. What a fascinating story. And as I said, definitely check out her photographs. Buy the new book, Fantasy Life, Baseball, and the American Dream. It is out tomorrow, or if you're listening to this after Friday, it is out now. Go to your local bookstore, buy it on Amazon, whatever you can do to purchase it. I highly recommend it, and I don't recommend books of baseball photographs very often, so that is a ringing endorsement from me. If you would like to email me, you can email me at can@icanread.com, icanread.com being my stand-up comedy page, or you can email me at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com. Love hearing from you guys. If you have any questions about television or the show or guest requests, anything like that, feel free to reach out. It's always great to hear from you. You can go on our Facebook page, just search TV Guidance Counselor, and you will find it as the only one. You can also tweet at me at TV Guidance or at Kenneth W. Reed. We'll have a brand new episode out on Wednesday, so be sure to be here then, and we'll see you next time on TV Guidance Counselor.
And it was the bathing suit poster with the erect
classic,
nipples.
yeah.
And clearly that was designed for men.
Oh, yes.
But I was oblivious to that. In